It's round two. We've got every quarterback ranked and tiered, every tight end for week 16. So before Sunday, let's break down these updated rankings for the playoffs. Welcome to in Fantasy Football, presented by ErvinandM.com. Where I combine industry-leading data, Vegas sportsbooks, and expert analysis to provide you with optimal weekly rankings for the utmost accuracy when setting your weekly lineups in your fantasy football league. I'm running this on Thursday night for Friday's video. Expect more videos every week for the other unit groupings like wide receiver and running back. And click the playlist in the top right for all the updated rankings for week 16 and other news. Sportsbooks have these quarterbacks projected to go for 270 yards or more. There's 6. Lamar Jackson, 271 over-under, 309 total yards per game, and 2.6 tutties per game. He gets Pittsburgh's 22nd worst pass defense. Josh Allen, 285 over-under, 278 yards per game, also 2.6 tutties per game. And he gets New England's league average pass defense. Joey 276 over, 284 yards per game. 2.6 tutties per game. He gets Cleveland's 11th best. Jalen Hurts, 234 over-under, in spite of 250 yards per game and 2.3 tutties per game. He has a tough matchup. It's a good total. They are favored against Washington's 4th best. Baker Mayfield, 246 over-under, but 277 yards per game. 2.5 tutties per game for Baker, the touchdown maker, against Dallas's soft 21st worst pass defense. And Jared Goff, 260 over-under, but 268 yards per game and 2.2 tutties per game against Chicago's 19th worst pass defense. They are your elite S-tier quarterbacks for week 16. They have the highest total yards per game above all other quarterbacks, and they all score 2.2 to 2.6 tutties every game. A-tier is for the rest of the elite quarterbacks, projected for about 250 to 260 total yards. Any of these guys could finish in the top 8. There's 7 and about 21 more pages to get through. And it's Sam Darnold, 252 over-under, 252 yards per game, 2.1 tutties per game. I mean, he scores the next most tutties in the league, and he faces the 13th best Seahawks pass defense. I can't talk. Total's not great, but they are favored by 3 in spite of being in Seattle. Should be a close game. You're not worried about Darnold seeing ghosts, etc. Jordan Love, 232 over-under, in spite of 246 passing yards per game. He scores 2 tutties per game, and he faces the Saints' 28th worst pass defense. It's rocket for J. Love in Green Bay. They are huge 14-point favorites in this one. Brock Purdy, 249 over-under, 266 yards per game. 1.5 tutties per game. Not bad. Not as good as the other guys, but that's why he's the third one in the A-tier. Niners have been struggling, but Miami has been struggling more. It's a close game with a pretty good total. Purdy should have to air it out to beat the Dolphins' 8th best at home. GL. Kyler Murray, 257 over-under, 253 yards per game, 1.4 tutties per game. He gets Carolina's 12th best, and it should prove a respectable matchup. However, Murray could really get some work done in the rushing department against Carolina's horrible run defense. 250 total is respectable. 1.4 tutties, not bad. Should be okay. And we'll go back to back with the next 3, since their matchups are all very tough and their lines are very, very similar. So Jaden Daniels, Tua Tagovailoa, and Pat Stafford. Jaden gets the number 1 defense in the league. Tua gets the 2nd best, and Stafford faces the 5th best. All these guys are set for 240 to 250 yards. Daniel's rush ability lends him some extra. They all score about 1.5 tutties per game, with Tua being the slight best at 1.8. But all these totals are pretty good in their respective games and are close matchups, so don't fret too much. Not like they're getting blown out. B tier is projected for about 240 to 250 total yards. These quarterbacks are solid this week. They score about 1.1 to 1.6 tutties. And they all face below average bottom defenses against the pass. And we'll kick it off with ErvinandM.com. ErvinandM.com is my company my best friend and I started in 2020. We literally make everything ourselves by hand. We have earrings, rings, necklaces, bracelets, tie clips, apparel, and more. Over a dozen curated gemstones and 100 handcrafted products. If you need a gift or something special for yourself, use the promo code in the description, find something you love, and buy it today. Back to the video. If you like spending money and looking good, spend it in my store. But if you don't, subscribe. It's free. It's Aaron Rodgers. 46 total as only 3-point dogs is pretty decent. But it makes sense considering his recent performances and that LA is only 19th against the pass. 1.6 tutties per game. Not bad. Not bad for old Rodgers. Caleb Williams, 254 over-under, 239 yards per game. I mean, he only averages 1.2 tutties. It's not great, but he does get a broken-down, injury-riddled Lions team and the 26th worst passing defense this week. So 254 is good. His rushing upside helps that total out, but they are practically 7-point doggies in this game. Not great. Drake May, 239 over-under, 225 yards per game. May comes in with 1.4 tutties, and he gets an equally bad pass defense this week. Buffalo is 25th worst, and they should allow him to get some work done, but it's going to be garbage central as they are also 7-point doggies. And Geno Smith. Geno's last with 1.1 tutties and only going for 240 passing this week. About 20 yards under his average. Vikings boast the 29th worst pass defense, but the line tells us that their total defense of the Vikings is going to prove very problematic for the Seahawks. It's a low total, albeit a close game. Could be worse. And now it is. We have arrived. At your last chance of viability, the cliff is real this week. Notice the difference in the tiers and how quickly it turns into garbage. Sportsbooks have this group for 230 to 240 total yards. Anywhere from 1.1 tutties to 1.8 tutties. Mostly just prayers. It's Patrick LaVon Mahomes II. 226 over-under. 239 yards per game. I mean, it's another dog water total for the Chiefs, favored by 3 at home against the Houston's 6th best pass defense. This is going to be a boring defensive game, and his line shows what to expect. This has got to be the lowest line for Mahomes all season. CJ Stroud, 231 over-under, 232 yards per game. And Stroud is on the other side of the ball. His matchup is about average in terms of passing, but at only 1.2 tutties per game. And the Chiefs' run defense, it makes sense why the total's so bad. It's going to be a tough, unwatchable game for everybody, especially Houston fans. Cooper Rush, 220 over-under, in spite of almost 240 yards per game in his last 5. To Cooper's credit, he is on the other side of the ball in the highest scoring game of the week with Tampa. 240 in his last 5 games is respectable, and Tampa's 30th against the pass. So it's a sweet matchup. Should be a defenseless, high-scoring game with Dallas as only 4-point dogs. Not that bad. But he does only average 1 touchdown per game. Russell Wilson, 213 over under, which is horrendous. But 239 yards per game. I mean, he's good for 1.8 tutties per game. Very good. And he faces Baltimore's 31st worst pass D. The total's decent, but sportsbooks have the Steelers as 7-point dogs. So that's not good. There's a chance, but it's not really. That's not good at all. And Anthony Richardson, 229 over under for total yards, in spite of only 211 total yards per game. And A-Rich, AR-15, Antonio Ricardo faces Tennessee with nearly the worst total of the week. They are 4-point favorites at home, but I don't know how excited you are for 1.2 tutties and 220 yards. Not good. But from here, it is absolute death, pure death, and dismay. They're unstartable. It's the rest. Bryce Young, Michael Penix, Mac Jones, AOC, Mason Rudolph, DTR, Spencer Rattler. That's your top quarterbacks. Two tight ends. S tier begins with 60 to 70 yards or more. And as usual, it's George Kittle. 64 over under, but 72 yards per game. He gets Miami, who stops 40% of tight ends. But George Kittle is a freak of nature, so don't worry. Trey McBride, 62 over under, but 72 yards per game. He faces Carolina, who only stops 30% of tight ends. A little bit better. But he doesn't score touchdowns like Kittle does, so he's second. And Brock Bowers, been these same three for like multiple weeks now. 61 over under, 69 yards per game. He faces the Jaguars, who allow 70% of tight ends to put in that work against them. So these three truly stand alone as usual. They are your elite S tier tight ends, undisputed. A tier is for the rest of the elite tight ends, projected for about 50 to 60 receiving yards. Any of these guys can finish top four. There's only 3 this week. They have okay matchups, but they are obvious must-starts. We'll move quickly. Hawkinson, TJ Hawkinson, 42 over under, 50 yards per game against Seattle, who allows 78% of tight ends to put in that work. Jonnu Smith, 50 over under, 53 yards per game. He gets San Fran. We'll be honest, stops 50% of tight ends, but Jonnu isn't your average tight end. He's been great this season. Don't be scared. Don't be scared at all. And Travis Kelce, 49 over under, 51 yards per game. He's got the worst matchup out of the lot. Houston stops 40% of tight ends. Or only allows 40% of tight ends. Well, I'm sorry. So he gets the end of the lot here. But B tier is for the rest of the tight end ones. There's only 5. If you've got any of these guys in B tier or the 6 above, you're feeling fine. These guys are projected for 40 to 50 yards. It's Sam Laporta. 45 over under, 43 yards per game. It's a great matchup against Chicago. They are heavy favorites, and the Bears allow 80% of tight ends to go over. No worries. Hunter Henry, 40 over under, 45 yards per game. I mean, in spite of this being a tremendous dog water, just absolute underdog. They are down by so much. Hunter is still set for 40 yards, and Buffalo allows 70% of tight ends to get home when facing them. So he should be fine as well. Jake Ferguson, 34 over under, 38 yards per game. He's got the best matchup out of everybody. He gets Tampa, who only stops 10% of tight ends from going over. He should be utilized accordingly. And Cooper Rush, I mean, it's going to be his little safety net. Tucker Kraft, 33 over under, but 40 yards per game. The Saints have only stopped 22% of tight ends, and Tucker is certainly better than most. He's a serious red zone threat, and they are heavy favorites against the crumbling Saints, and he scores a tutty 50% of the time. And it's Mark Andrews. He faces the Steelers this week. 33 over-under, 37 yards per game. And the Steelers hold nearly half of tight ends to the under. Andrews is like Tucker, though, and he's a red zone threat mainly, and while his yardage isn't anything crazy, it's also a coin flip for a tutty. That's more than we can say for a lot of the others. We've arrived at C tier. And the mid-lords, if you have anyone here, I'm sorry, it is your last viable anything. Most of them have poor matchups and low projections. 30 to 40 yards and a prayer. Pat Freiermuth, 32 over-under, 35 yards per game. Baltimore's pass defense is weak, and they've only been able to stop 20% of tight ends this season. I mean, 30 yards isn't single-handedly winning your matchup, but you should feel reasonably safe that he'll get that work, and if you're lucky, a touchdown. I believe he's about 40%, so possible. Dalton Kincaid, 39 over-under, 37 yards per game. Kincaid is pretty good. Better at his position than most of the others in this tier for sure. But the Patriots lock 50% of tight ends down. It could prove pretty challenging for him to get going, and that's not great since this position just doesn't get a lot of opportunities. Cade Otton, 30 over-under in spite of 43 yards per game. And it's basically the same thing for Otton. Cowboys hold 44% of tight ends to the under, and his 30-yard line shows that concern. He's normally good for 40 or more, but this week, probably not. Dalton Schultz, 33 over-under, 31 yards per game. He has the best matchup out of the lot, with the Chiefs only being able to stop 20% of tight ends, but it's not like Schultz is a focal point of the Houston offense. He's looking at the same 30 yards as every other week. We'll go back-to-back with Jawan Johnson and Britton Strange. Two garbage offenses with two tough matchups holding 50% of tight ends to the under. They don't even average 30 yards per game, but this week they both make the cut thanks to Vegas's 30-yard line for Jawan and Stranger's 35-yard line against the Raiders. And from here, it's RIP. It's less than 25 yards. They're unstartable. It's the rest. Kyle Pitts, Cole Kmet, Noah Gray, Mike Gesicki, Isaiah Likely, Noah Fant. I'll throw your quarterbacks and tight ends full screen back on screen now. Leave your questions below. And I sincerely hope this helps everyone watching. Thank you all for your time. The season's been amazing. All the rankings and news for Week 16 will be in the playlist in the top right of the screen. Make sure to subscribe and turn on post notifications so you get all these updates, all these rankings, before submitting your lineup on Sunday. If you like looking good and spending money, use the promo code and spend it in my store. And watch some more videos!